today we have our Shanti ma'am on board. So let me give a short introduction about Shanti ma'am. She holds a master's degree in human genetics from Andhra University and bachelor's degree in special education from NIEPID. Shanti ma'am has worked with two international schools in the beginning of her career and later started her own school for special needs children called Adventure Academy in 2011. She has also collaborated with another special educator and started a college vocational training unit for young adults with special needs, ECA Educational and Special Educator in 2018. She is currently serving as president of SERPA, which is a Special Educators and Rehabilitation Professions Association, which brings a league of professionals together from across the world to work collaboratively. She is also a consultant guest lecturer at KPMRC. She is serving in an honorary position as an advisor for the project on ethical use of artificial intelligence under the Department of Education, the University of Buckingham. She is a volunteer and a consultant special educator and teacher trainer at Samarthana Trust for the Disabled. Her experience provides her the opportunity to work across disability, severity, and age group. Her work mainly comprises on increasing children's capacities in essential areas like personality development, socio-communication skills, self-esteem, self-belief, belief, academics, activities of daily living, vocational and pre-vocational skill, academic competence, empowering their families, counseling and guidance, mainstreaming children and young adults into schools and employment are her mission in life. She intends to further her aim by making inclusion a norm. Shanti ma'am has conducted several workshops, close to 70, and training for teachers, corporates, parents, educators, therapists, etc., on various special needs topic, especially on showing inclusion as an attainable concept. Shanti ma'am volunteers in other organizations to empower the staff so that they can render better quality of service. She practices vocal music, painting, meditation, watches drama, studies science in her free time. So we are really happy to have you on board, ma'am. So I'll just hand over the session to you and you can take over.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Amal, for this opportunity. It's been quite intriguing, meeting you and understanding the whole vision and mission of Daffodils and how it's been evolving in the last couple of years. And I'm really looking forward for Daffodils' health to grow multifolded. And the steps that you're taking are, directed towards inclusion, and I can see it. I'm really very happy to, being a part of, today's session and, facilitate this.
Thank you so much for doing this, Shanti. Yeah, we've been, I think, talking about, related stuff for more than a year now. Yeah, so it's really nice to have you, doing a session with us. And yeah, looking forward to learning a lot about inclusion from you today.
Likewise, but however, I feel that whatever we know of inclusion, in spite of like working for the last 14 years, it still feels like what we know is just the tip of the iceberg. The more you try to get into it, the vaster it gets. So anyway, so I convey my greetings to all the participants here today. Hope you're having a good weekend, and thank you for signing up for this session in spite of the weekend. Tina has given a lot of listed out my work experiences from various organizations and all. And I would like to mention that inclusion has not been a concept that has to be taught to all the participants or parents or any students at college level. It's not something to learn from the textbooks or something to learn from the classrooms or between four walls. I would like to bring in my experience as a genetics students, having learned genetics at master's level, and getting into a little bit of research about various genetic disorders and how variations happen and all. Before I got into special education, it was a very enlightening experience to see how we all have I'm sure all of us know that we are all separated with DNAs. Our DNAs are not, the same. We all have various different genes, and then we still coexist on this earth in spite of our differences. I would like to start today's session with a small analogy of home. Everybody would like to have a house or a shelter for themselves. When a house is being built by someone, assuming that there's a barren land and empty land, and it takes a lot of courage and effort for someone to think about building a house. And to build a house, it's not a single man's job. Of course, technically speaking, it can be possible, it's not impossible. But when people from different aspects come together to build a house, it will get into a better shape. And while building the house, the person who is aiming to build this house takes into consideration the various needs of the people living in that house. It could be the daughter or son, and trying to modify it. They ask them how they want it, and they try to make modifications. And the house is not built on one single day. It takes some time to build the house, and to convert that house as a home, it takes even more time. And once the home is built, it's not that people live in that house forever. They try to make small little adjustments and modifications and to make it a much happier and livable place. Same is inclusion. That this example, what I've quoted, is nothing but an analogy to inclusion. Inclusion is not an end product. It's a constant process by the definition. I'm going to share a screen right now. And we'll be talking about the definition of inclusion and what are the pros and cons, how are the different perspectives looking at inclusion as and disability as, and how it's been evolving over the period. And I'll also be giving some recommendations to make the classrooms a lot more inclusive. But having said that, there is no hard and fast definition of protocols to be followed. Of course, there are protocols given by the governments, the boards, and UNESCO itself. Having said that, they recommend it as to be a flexible model. That's the best advantage of inclusion. As I said, again, coming back to the house building or building a home, people are flexible about making their own adjustments and remodifications and all. Inclusion is a similar process. It's not a hard and fast rule or something like that. It is a very intriguing concept of inclusion, that we should never go by the definitions all the time, but keep ourselves flexible, because that's how we are all designed genetically and biologically also. We all have our own differences, and we still learn to coexist. That's it. That itself is an inclusion, philosophically speaking. So having said that, keeping this as a background, I would like to start today's presentation. Amal, I would like to know whether we are going to take the doubts from the participants in between, or do you want the doubts to be parked till the end and address everything, or is it flexible?
Yeah, so we have some questions that have come in the form as well. So we will pick them up at the end anyways. So all the questions could go in the chat box right now, and we could take them up one at a time at the end.
At the end, is it? All right, yeah. So participants can write down their doubts and post in the chat box, or ask towards the end. Thank you so much. So before I start the session today, I would like to know from the participants if you guys can unmute yourself and give me your perspective of inclusion. So as said, inclusion is not like a rigid definition or something, but it's all about perspectives, how we build it together, in collaboration with each other. So I'd like to know from your idea of what's your idea on inclusion. Basing on that, we can see how we can collaborate it together, and how we'll understand how it's all true by its own sense. So there's no right or wrong answer. Please unmute yourself and let's speak about inclusion, and then we will see what the textbooks are speaking as well. What is inclusion according to you?
Hi, I'm Dashmi. I'm a speech language pathologist, and inclusion according to me is accessibility, irrespective of the drawbacks or limitations that people have. Being able to access everything just like everyone else is inclusion according to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dashmi. That's great. Anyone else would like to drop in their ideas about inclusion?
Ma'am, I'm Dr. Fauzia from Aligarh.
Mhm.
And according to me, inclusion, because I work with children, I work in an inclusive school. So on the basis of my experience, I would say, like ma'am had just now said, that it's accessibility, it's acceptance as well. This realization that all children deserve education and deserve maybe equal and also equitable opportunities for growth and development as per their needs and abilities. So it is acceptance of these children, of all children with individual differences, so that they can all learn and get education.
Right.
So for me, it's basically acceptance.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Anyone else would like to
Kaitali
throw
from
some
Bangalore. I'm
Yes,
Kaitali
please.
from Bangalore.
Yeah.
I believe that we've started the concept with all children can learn. Everybody can learn with a little bit of adjustments from the parents, the teachers, the management. Everybody can learn. That is inclusion.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Shanti ma'am, this is Akila Krishnamurthy. So
Hi,
I believe
Akila. Yes.
yeah, hi ma'am. I believe that inclusion is not expecting that child to change, but we, the people, the environment, we change to make them feel comfortable. So that's my concept of inclusion.
Absolutely. Anyone else would like to throw their perspective?
This is Swaraj.
Huh?
According to me, inclusion means creating equal opportunity for every child with a level playing field,
Right.
and treating each child equally in same manner
Absolutely.
by increasing our own capabilities to handle them.
Right. Absolutely. Anyone else would like to add up?
Hi, ma'am. This is Ruby from Chennai.
Yeah.
So according to me, it's kind of a new approach towards educating the children in spite of their disability, and it's an giving an equal opportunity to all the children.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, it's not differentiating the inclusion means not differentiating the children based on their physical and their mental thing. We should not be differentiating them. We have to meet the child where the child is and give an equal opportunity to everyone. That's the one.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
I would like to say something.
Yes. Yes, Priya.
Yeah. Actually, we are doing with unawareness inclusion, but now we need to do with awareness and by understanding.
Right. Absolutely. So, when everyone's done, then we'll start off. So it's just beautiful to see that how everyone's giving a part of inclusion, and then together this is what is making inclusion. Right. So when I said the analogy about the home, so home is not just about one room. It has got different rooms, and every room has to have these things that everyone is able to use that room, and all this will make that home a complete place, a wholesome thing. And as said, some of you were giving answers like new approach, not to differentiate, awareness, expectations from the society. So all this comprises inclusion. So let's get into it. In case if I'm using any of the words a little technical, please feel free to make a note of it, and towards the end I'll be very happy to explain. I try to change the terminology into common words so that everyone can understand. Yeah. So as per your answers and putting things together, inclusion is a legal, moral, ethical, as well as a civil right. Every child and individual has the right to take education according to the limits of his or her capacity, whether that capacity be it small or big, irrespective of it, they have every right to take the education. And it's not just about the education. Every adult or the individual or the child has the right to enjoy the freedom, work, as well as live the way they want it to be. So this is the whole idea of inclusion. So we'll be looking at the definition and understand the terms each and every one by one. Okay. Someone's trying to talk to me.
Screenshot.
You want to take a screenshot? Is it okay? What I can do is, if Amal wants, I can give a PDF of this PowerPoint presentation so that you can save your energy from writing things or taking screenshots.
Right, yeah, that'll be great, Shanti. We can then circulate it with the
Sure. Please save your energy from writing things and all. I'll give the PDF of this. So let's try to look at this whole idea and concept of inclusion from two different perspectives. One is the medical model of thinking and the other is the social model of thinking. So in the medical model of thinking, the person is found to be a faulty person and they try to fix that person alone. Whereas a social model of thinking of inclusion is the person is valued irrespective of what they have, what their medical or psychological or whatever limitations are. Still we find them as a valued person and see what we can do with their existing abilities. So medical model looks at the diagnosis of the person, try straight away into what they're unable to do and why they're unable to do, whereas the social model gets into looking at the strengths and the needs which are defined by the self and others. What are the things that they can do and how their strengths can be used by everyone else? What are their needs and how their needs can be facilitated and by being provided by the society by large? So the model varies. The diagnosis part of the medical professionals, they look at it as trying to address specifically that particular thing through medication or therapies or something. But whereas the social model, where we are all including as parents or professionals, we try to look at it as a strengths and needs, limitations, and define it by their own self and by everyone others. Medical model looks at labeling, diagnosis and labeling come together as a part of identification of the problem and where they're fitting into. Whereas a social model looks at identifying the barriers and in developing sustainable solutions. If there is a problem, let's try to find a solution for it. So we as a society will have to look at what are the barriers for the person to fully be living to the fullest, and then trying to develop solutions for those barriers. In the medical model of thinking, impairment becomes the focus of attention. The doctor or the medical professionals try to look at that specific area and try to give attention to that one particular area. Whereas a social model looks at the outcome-based program. That is, we try to look at as an end product. We want this particular person or the child to become so-and-so. That's the outcome. We want the society to be inclusive, or we want this workplace or this whole school to be inclusive, and that's the outcome. We look there and then we try to work towards it. A program is designed aiming at an outcome, but whereas the impairment based focus by the medical professionals goes specifically into giving, for example, seizures, and they try to attend to that medication and try to stop the seizures. But whereas we as professionals, we try to see how we can educate this person so that they can be on their own feet. So that's the outcome. And then next, moving on, assessments and monitoring programs of their therapies are imposed by the medical model. So they try to look at it and try to address that solution and try to overcome the signs and symptoms. That's the medical model through assessments, monitoring programs, therapies, medication and all. But whereas the social model of thinking involves resources are made available to ordinary services. It should become a norm for people, for the schools or for the society by large, to ensure that the services are provided for everyone, not just restraining. Educational model, for example, earlier the classrooms used to be very rigid, but now resource rooms and therapies are being included in the mainstream itself, and it's becoming an ordinary, it's becoming a norm eventually. So that's the social model of thinking. Whereas in the medical model of thinking, segregation and alternative services, they will tell you that you come to our hospital and then you have these different therapies, you go to these therapies, and they pull out that individual and try to give them at 1:1, or an alternative model is being provided by them. But whereas in the social model of thinking, we try to make disability equality training for all. So classroom curricula is made or designed, for example, a curriculum is made in a form that the students attending in this class, everyone in the class are equally benefiting, not just the students who are on disability or who are not on the disability. It is not like that. It is an equality, whereas disability equality means everyone is being treated equally in that form. So there is no segregation there, whereas in the medical model, they suggest segregation. But again, this is not something wrong, but that's how it is being addressed, because things have to come together. Again, medical model thinking, what happens here is ordinary needs are put on hold. They don't look at generalization, inclusion, they have to be a part of the society. That's not their duty. Their duty is to address that medical perspective to the point on dot. So ordinary needs are put on hold. For example, I was referring to seizure medication. So doctor's duty is to protect the child from having, or the individual from having further brain damage. So they give medication. What happens after medication is not, their focus. That's put on hold for them. Whether they're feeling more sleepy, are they able to comprehend, their memory is being affected, that's all secondary for them. For them, it is important for that patient to be saved from further damage or from fatality. Whereas the social model encourages social relationships in spite of that. And coming back again to the medical model, re-entry if normal enough or permanent exclusion. So they, for example, in the recent RPW Act, we also see a lot of blood-related conditions like hemophilia, sickle cell anemia, etc. So where doctors recommend complete exclusion for them because hemophilia and lots of genetic disorders, for example, cannot be permanently cured. You can only help them, sustain for a little longer, survive for a little longer with the medical advancements and, facilities. So they look at it re-entry only if normal enough that they can sustain. Otherwise, they will recommend for a permanent exclusion and safeguard them and save them so that they can live longer. However, the social model of thinking welcomes the disabled person to be included at every aspect of life. We don't look at it, live for longer and all. That's not our perspective. Society thinks that you welcome, however you are, we are accepting you, and let's see what changes we can make, and so that you are along with us. Society remains unchanged in the medical model, whereas society keeps evolving because we make the changes in ourselves. Society keeps evolving in the social model of thinking. So this is the background of inclusion, how a medical perspective is looked at and how a social perspective is looked at, and how these things come together to make the place Earth a livable place. So we usually look at having students and children at home with various special needs. We restrict our knowledge of inclusion to only students with disabilities. We only think that the student who is having a challenge coming and attending my classroom, and okay, I'm an inclusive educator, or my school is inclusive, or my classroom is inclusive. So inclusion is not just about having a student with special needs or a disability in our classroom. It's a larger picture. Okay, what inclusion comprises of? A holistic picture or broader, wider picture. That is, working children also have to be included. Children with disabilities, girl students, and girls who are living in difficult circumstances. Children with medical conditions like HIV or AIDS and other chronic illnesses and disabilities. Children of migrant laborers, street children who are not having enough opportunity, that is below poverty line and stuff. And then all other children, and then children from remote and tribal areas who do not have awareness and facilities and opportunities, all of them to be included, and that comprises of inclusive educational model. Now, when this comes at moving from education to every other aspects of our life, like how we have different rooms in our house, like kitchen, bedroom, like that, in our society, education is just one part of it. We also encounter different rooms in our life, that is hospitals, parks, workplaces majorly, like every avenue, like marriages, everything comprises and makes this life a holistic thing. We are called as educators, not just teachers. Why educators? Because we have to work towards a holistic development of the child. Holistic development not just restricts a person to take education, take therapies, multimodal therapies, but also looking at a broader picture of evolving them to be an independent adult, in terms of, attaining marital life or, sexual gratification or, places livable. Are they able to fight for their own rights? All these things have to be considered. That's why we are called as educators, preparing them holistically. Educate them at all the areas, not just to teach one particular concept. So coming back to this picture, so this gives a graphical representation of how different kinds of students come together, and that's when we call it as inclusive education. Inclusive education is not just about one individual with special needs coming to the classroom and taking. we also have to consider all the other children and coming to the class, and when that education becomes equally absorbed by all the students, and then we call it as an inclusive education classroom. It's a well thought out educational program and has the potential to meet the diverse educational needs. These are the diversity of the students that could comprise a classroom of. That is what is all children. So one of you were answering to the questions when I asked what according to you is inclusion. This is what it is. All children can learn, and all children have to learn. So so this is the house example I was talking about. The house could be built from a barren land to something big, and then it keeps evolving. It doesn't restrict. After some time, people would like to change their house and make it better place all the time, to ensure that everybody living in the house is happy, healthy, and is enjoying and achieving or not, and reaching to a stage of self-actualization, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Coming back to the definition of inclusive education, this is what the definition defined by UNESCO. So if you look at it, I have highlighted lots of parts of this definition. First time when we are reading this definition, it gives us a different perspective. So you keep reading this definition every time you meet different children with various special needs, or individuals, adults with special needs. This definition makes a lot of sense every time you read it, and how each and every word in this definition is such a pearl, pearls of wisdom basically. So inclusive education, as UNESCO sees inclusive education as a process. It's not an end product, it's a process. It's a constantly evolving, a cyclic process of addressing and responding to the diversity of needs of all learners. Now, if we want to look at it as inclusive society, let's remove the word learners and replace it in the form with individuals living in the society as citizens. So it's a process of addressing and responding to the diversity of needs of all learners through increasing the participation in learning, cultures and communities, as well as reducing the exclusion. So we need to look at this as that we need to provide the opportunities for the people with various diverse needs, and who are all falling into this inclusive education bubble or inclusion bubble, by increasing the opportunities for everyone. That's when we increase the opportunities, the participation also will increase. And as well as the reducing the exclusion has to be also be considered, not just always increasing the opportunity. So we need to identify what are the criteria that are making inclusion not possible or restricting it, so that we can reduce them. The more we reduce, the more we are giving better examples for people to embrace, and that becomes a lifestyle. And that's how civilizations happen, by small little modifications made for generations together. So reducing the exclusion within and from the education system itself. As I said, let's look at this not just to educational perspective, but as life in general. So it applies to workplaces and lifestyles, everything. This involves changes and modifications in content, approaches, structures, and strategies, with a common vision which covers all children appropriate of age range and conviction that it is responsibility of the regular school system. So I really love this word of responsibility of the regular system to educate all the children. Like how a parent of the house, like it could be a father or a grandfather or a mother, whoever it is, they take up the responsibility to make the house a better place. And then they look into what are the diverse needs of the inmates in the house, and they try to make the modifications, take up a strategy or change the strategy. They approach it differently and all. It's the responsibility of the regular system, the regular school and the boards to educate all the children. It's not the responsibility of the parents. It's not the responsibility of that person with the special needs or one person. It's the whole system whose responsibility it is to educate all the children. So let's keep revising this, definition over and again, not restricting it to today's session, and then it will all make sense, and we'll be finding solutions for all the barriers that were coming in the process of inclusion. So the 6 main traits that we need to keep under consideration for inclusion are curiosity. The curiosity is the main thing even for the learners. That's why when we are developing lesson plans for our children, we also write what is the motivation factor here. What is the curiosity that you're going to create here for the children to be motivated to learn this lesson? So curiosity has to be taken into consideration even by us as adults or by society, to see what is it that we need to do. So because of different ideas and experiences, it enables the growth of the society or the school or the classroom itself. So we need to identify what are the factors of curiosity here and develop that, work on that. Also, we all need to have cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence, what are the diverse needs? Again, it is reflecting on the definition, diversity of needs of all learners. So keeping in consideration cultural intelligence, that not everyone comes from the same background, we're all different. And difference is good. That's why we are coded, we are all differently coded genetically, but we are made to coexist on this one planet called Earth. So we need to understand the differences, accept the differences, and inculcate that in our programs that we design, be it a classroom design or a school design or a workplace design. If you're an employer, you need to keep in mind cultural intelligence as one of the most important things, so that your workplace becomes, or your classroom becomes, more inclusive. Collaboration, like how a house cannot be built by one single person. A lot of people come together to make this place a better one. We might not have expertise in everything, electrician or plumbing work, carpentry work, right from building the infrastructure, interior designer. Everyone come together to build this home and to make it a better place. We can't go and get expertise in everything. Maybe we can go and get expertise in everything, but that is going to take a lot of time. So collaboration is one of the biggest answer for inclusion to be most doable and easily doable, sustainable solution. We need to collaborate with everyone and see what is the outcome that we are expecting and how we collaborate together to make this a possibility and make this process a sustainable solution as such, so that curriculum doesn't have to be redesigned every year, or once in every 5 years the curriculum is being redesigned by the boards or by the government policies and all. Let's come together and design and set examples for the future generation. And collaboration is the answer for it, for the diverse thinking. We might not be able to think like the other experts, so it is important to collaborate and have the ideas put together. Commitment. It shouldn't be like one fancy thing and all that stuff. We have commitment for our own family in our own house, and we ensure that we try to bring a balance between both of them. And there are lots of people who come into becoming teachers and taking up teaching as a profession just because they're unable to fit into their their regular workforces. Like a lot of people apply for teaching profession because they're unable to balance house needs, because husband is working, children are growing. So I want to work only for 4 or 5 hours. So a teaching profession is something that can't be it. Inclusion also cannot be embraced on those terms. Inclusion has to be embraced because you are committed towards it, because and see that it is a solution. That's the life form. You need to get to that stage and then start embracing it. Because you start a project or you start some certain ideas and then you leave it at some end, it's not going to reap benefits. It will make others dissatisfied and lose interest. It disappoints and demotivates people who are taking the effort. So you need to get in commitment. You might not be able to get solutions for inclusive barriers in first go. You might have to fail and then redo it and do it again and again. In one go, you might not be able to find. So the commitment is required. There is no one-stop solution for anything in this world. We constantly keep evolving and developing. It demands a lot of commitment. So commitment is one of the most important and most ignored thing. And when you're in bringing in a team to develop inclusive solutions, you need to see that whether they are on the same page and are able to deliver the same amount of commitment like you do. And it's as a part of the team and the leaders to bring in that commitment and give them what they want, so that this commitment is being continued. Staying with that idea for a longer time till the goal is achieved is crucial for making inclusion a possibility. And as I said, courage, when I was referring to the home thing also, to build a house, it brings in a lot of courage. It's not an easy thing, because the person who's going to build a house, they need to plan a lot of things in terms of finances, in terms of money, in terms of time. A lot of things needs to be kept in consideration. It takes a lot of courage in spite of having a lot of other commitments, and still they sign up for it. So it takes a lot of courage to talking about, all these things. And similarly, when it comes to inclusion, it is important for people to talk about all the imperfections that as their NGO or as their school or their classroom has. And it involves a lot of personal risk taking as well. When you're talking to people that I have this, lack of patience, it takes a lot of courage. But tell them that I have lack of patience. Let's come to what I can do so that my limitations are met out, and then I'm able to accept my classroom as an inclusive classroom. Likewise, for everything, courage is required in the classroom. Forget about classroom. Let's talk about a society by large, be it an NGO that you're building or a workplace you're having, a corporate workplace you're developing, for example, a startup. It needs a lot of courage to talk about your imperfections, your limitations as a provider, and also take a lot of risk. But still, all this will come together as a part, like how to make a nice dish. You put a lot of things, elements in it, and make it a wholesome thing. Like that, courage is one of the important parts, and you have to be courageous, not let go of things very easily and discouraged by all the things coming from the society or from within as well. Cognizance is having knowledge or awareness of what it is. So being leaders, as a family leader or a school leader or NGOs or a startup leader or whatever it is, being a leader, it is very important to develop the habit of having high amounts of cognizance and evolving throughout, which means having a knowledge and awareness of all stakeholders involving under your umbrella. Bias is the leader's Achilles heel. It's like it's your weakness. It's a vulnerable point. So have knowledge of everyone in your classroom or all the employees under your shelter, and see to it that you're trying to address those. If you're not, then it will become weak. Like how builder of the house has a knowledge of how to lay the foundation, how the ground level is, how the water level. They dig deep down and try to understand and do a survey before they start off. Like that, as leaders or the house parent or house, what you call bread earner or whatever it is, you need to have the knowledge and awareness of everybody involved under your umbrella. So you are not being just a part of an inclusive educational model, you're also being a part of the society. So know what your society involves and try to make sustainable solution, take small little activities, and bring your courage, ideas together, and this world's a better place. So so this picture is nothing but a reflection of this definition. So slowly, one by one, we'll start, associating with each other as we go into it. So diversity and inclusion are the happening thing. One of you were referring to inclusion is a new approach and all. So yes, the words are new. Diversity word is new, inclusion word is new and all. But having said that, inclusion has been there from the beginning. We just have not been able to fancy that word for a long time. Now that it's become fancy, we are able to embrace it and trying to see what it is and all. But it's been there. But the good point is a lot of strategies have come forth in the last few decades, from India and outside as well, to address this diversity and inclusion at various levels, be it school or college or workplace, whatever it is. Yeah. So,
hey, the disability inclusion.
Sorry? Somebody's trying to say something?
No, I think it's
okay.
It's gotten unmuted, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So a dedicated team has to work on this. If you're running an NGO or if you're having a workplace or a school or something, you need to have a team which is dedicatedly working towards to ensure that inclusion is happening at every step, and nobody is neglected, and that everyone is improving, not just the student or the students in the classroom, but we as a staff member, as the leaders of the NGOs or a parent of the house are improving or not. So how do we go about this? To start off, we need to start measuring D&I. D&I stands for diversity and inclusion. So we recommend you to start with 2 universal overarching surveys. That is, one is diversity and one is for inclusion. How diverse are we in our environment, be it our home or be it our NGO or a classroom? How diverse are we, and what are the different diverse needs that our classroom or our college or workplace is comprising of? And then develop another checklist or a measurement tool to understand what is inclusion, how are we inclusive, whether everyone's being included or not. And this checklist, both of these have to be filled in in the form of Google Forms or through interview models or self-checklists to understand whether everyone feels belonged in that society or in the environment that you're approaching it. So these 2 surveys sound similar, but both are two different things. One is to understand the diverse needs and all, and the other one is to check where we are standing. Both are two different surveys that you need to work on. These surveys will basically give us a baseline to break down your current demographic idea, how you're functioning, whether your employees or whether your students of all the backgrounds are having a good sense of belongingness, whether they are being met, whether they are being addressed, whether they are being given equal opportunities or not, whether their capacities are being fully met or not. All these things have to be considered when you're developing this diversity and inclusion checklist. Then once that is done, getting a baseline measurement of this D&I. So as said by the previous definition, it is a constant process. So your measurement lines have to keep developing and evolving on regular basis. It can't get stuck with one model. You start off with one checklist, a checklist of rating scale of 5, and this is the criteria, and then get a baseline of that, and then eventually measure that, and then move on for the next term or for the next quarter or for the next 5 years, develop another checklist and work towards it. And that's why it's called as a process. When you're doing D&I, you will face a lot of challenges, and also understand that there are lots of challenges coming from your own understanding of these two surveys that you have conducted. Address each and every challenge has to be addressed uniquely and specifically, and come up with a lot of solutions. These solutions have to reflect the sustainable solutions, that whether they are affordable, whether they are doable or not, whether they long lasted or not, permanent solutions, at least permanent solutions. And that's what sustainability means. So we need to work towards sustainable solutions, because we don't want to get back to it again and again. But having said that, we need to build a feedback program for our own D&I, and then again reflect it and relook at it. What are the drawbacks or what are the gaps in it? And then again develop the strategies to address these D&I challenges or shortcomings in our own organization. And that's how we evolve one by one step at a time. So there are levels of inclusion. One is community level, the other one is connection, contribution, contemplation, and comprehensive inclusion. What is community inclusion? Social inclusion is about physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, and the quality of life, whether all these are being addressed by community by large or not. For example, movies, are the movies being inclusive or not? Whether they're keeping in mind everyone's needs or not. All these things have to be kept in mind. Or parks, are the parks being inclusive or not? If parks are not inclusive, then you need to find solutions for it. Again, run the D&I checklist surveys that I was referring here, and then come to solutions, develop solutions, work, take feedback, and set as a biggest model or a model for inclusion for others to follow the lead. Similarly, connections, that is the emotional inclusion, whether the person that you're working with or who are under consideration are in sync with that or not. That needs to be taken into consideration. Without that, connect, you won't be. So involving the people who are under this spectrum or the disability or the inclusion bubble, the vulnerable students from migrant laborers or HIV contracted students or leprosy cured, all of them have to be considered and put in the planning bubble. Without these connections, and you cannot really achieve this emotional inclusion. They should be a part of it, whether they are in need of it or not. You need to know and what makes them happy, what is it that they want, and address that rather than what we think is inclusion. That's not inclusion. It's about monarchy. If you think that this is not inclusion, this is what I want to do, that's our personal selfishness, selfish wants. So involving them in this part is very important. So connections are really very important part of this. Unless you make it, but spiritual happiness also will not be achieved by the people who are falling under this bubble. The next one is the contribution part. Contribution of various people, as I mentioned previously, various other people will have to come together to collaborate, because each person has their own expertise. I can't be an electrician, I can't be a plumber in my house and do things because I don't have those backgrounds. It's important to bring in intellectual inclusion, that people from different spheres come and contribute to it, and that's how you actually come for sustainable solution. You do it by yourself, that's not going to be sustainable. So this will also bring in a dignity of contributing for each other, and they will also feel responsible. That's why UNESCO definition says that it's the responsibility of the regular system, right? So the sense of responsibility comes in when you make everyone a leader and come be a part of this inclusive revolution. The next level of inclusion is contemplation, the spiritual inclusion part. That is, what is it making sense to? Who is it being served to? Is it making any sense? Is it making any meaning to anyone or to me, or who are all stakeholders in the beneficial part of this? Whether it is serving the purpose, whose purpose it's serving, for how long this is, all these things have to be kept under consideration. That's a spiritual inclusion, and that level is very important. If without considering that part, the inclusion will remain an incomplete or not a wholesome process. Then the process of the most important part of this inclusive levels is it needs to be a very comprehensive inclusive plan. That is, comprehensive inclusion happens with good health, quality of life, and where the necessary of a cure needs to be found. Cure for not just medical thing, but problems. Every problem has a solution. If it's not having, if you feel that it's not getting a solution, then it is what it is, and then we need to learn to move on and make life livable for everyone in the bubble. And we should not ignore the part which says that quality of life. Life is not about just survival or living, but we also need to look at the life that everyone's living in our bubble are having a quality life. That's why when I was talking about the home example again, I was talking about the father ensures that everyone in the house are being happy and healthy or not. Happiness is very important. The quality of life of everyone under our umbrella, be it in the classroom or in the school or in your workplace, everyone's leading a quality life or not is very important. So it has to be thought through at that level, and only then our goals are reached. Then only it will become a wholesome process. So let's look at inclusive education. So the definition I've given. So I also want to reflect on what's inclusive education being defined by our own RPWD Act. So inclusive education refers to the educational practices. So this definition has been adapted from a professor from Harvard. This is not a properly Indian definition, but this is what we are following in our textbooks in Indian colleges and all. So inclusive education refers to educational practice based on the philosophical belief. So that's why I said the previous one, spiritual and all that stuff. So there are criteria that we cannot really define, like, whether the person is really happy and all, quality of life and all. So it's a philosophical belief that all learners, those with disabilities and those without. So this is very important. Inclusion means not just including special needs child in the classroom. You need to also consider how the other students in the classroom are being benefited with the modifications that you're recommending. So those with disabilities and those without also have a right to be educated together in an age-appropriate class groups. So when I'm saying without also, it also includes non-special needs as well as migrant laborer students or girl students who have been ignored, or students who underwent a lot of trauma, mental illness, everyone included in this. They have the right to be educated together in age-appropriate class groups. It's very important to understand that it's very important to keep the classrooms age-appropriate. A lot of parents, think that, okay, my child is 8-year-old and he can still go to, pre-KG, or a 14-year-old child goes to grade 3 classroom because, his academic levels are at that level. So it's a very tricky question here for us to understand a 14-year-old child going to grade 3, how important it is at that stage. What are we addressing? Is it the academics that we are looking at, or is it the social and the intellectual or emotional needs that we are addressing? A 14-year-old will have a different biological growth. Hormones will be growing at a different rate, and we are putting them at grade 3 level, where the children in the classroom are at a different level of growth. So is it age appropriate? What is it that we are looking at is a philosophical belief and a question that we need to re-look into and dig deep in. At the same time, there are lots of gifted students with very high IQs. Their parents want them to jump into different classroom because they are performing at a very high level. For example, a 6-year-old can be sent to a grade 8 or 7 classroom because he is already functioning at that level academically. But a grade 8 student's maturity level and puberty and all that stuff will be at a social intelligence and social quotients, emotional quotients will be at a different level than the child who is is supposed to be in a grade 3 level. So it's very important and a tricky question, and it involves a lot of critical thinking abilities about the age-appropriate classrooms thing. Continuing, age-appropriate class groups, and that will benefit from education in the regular classrooms of the community schools. Within these settings, teachers, parents, and other workers collaboratively, they work collaboratively using appropriate and sufficient resources. Now, when we have all these questions, who is benefiting, what is that they are going to benefit out of it, that's where this collaboration will help us in finding better answers. And also it helps us in providing the sufficient resources to interpret and to enact the regular curriculum. Curriculum is being defined by different boards. How we are reflecting them in our regular classroom and how everyone is benefiting out of that is the biggest question, and the critical thinking and that's collaborative work will help us reach the answers, and that in a flexible manner. That's why I said it's flexible manner. We have to keep evolving and changing, and that's why it will make this whole inclusion as a process in accordance with the individual abilities and needs of all the learners, right? So I request everyone to really look into these definitions and try to make sense. Every word in the definitions are really beautiful pearls. So coming to the practicing of inclusive education, so today's presentation I've included a lot of recommendations for inclusive education practices, be it in the mainstream classroom or in a special needs school or in a small NGO, or in a college, how inclusive education classrooms can be practiced. I did not involve a lot of examples from the workplace because I got to know a lot of professionals and parents are participating in today's session. So I've tried to keep in mind that education could be a better example to reflect upon. So practice inclusive education. Understanding inclusion as a continuing process is the first and foremost thing that we need to keep in mind. It's a continuing process. It's not an end product, and that we are giving a product that one size fits all kind of a thought thing. It's not that. It's a continuous process. We have to keep involving ourselves in improvising it. So encouraging the participation of all the students, teachers, and parents is very important here. If you look at the first word, it is saying students' involvement, participation is the important thing. We often ignore the students from the classroom to be involved in the participation of this planning process itself. It's the teachers or the management who usually involve the planning part and ignore the students. The students are the main ones to be included in planning. Some of the schools have now embraced this, quality circle time. They sit together and talk about each other's, limitations, difficulties, and all. That's where even the inclusive practices also have to be initiated and triggered and probed for the students to think through that every child in the classroom has diverse needs and how we can make our classroom practices more inclusive. And frankly speaking, in my experience, it's the students who came up with really the best and most sustainable solutions than we, the grown-ups. Because their minds are very fresh and they do not have any layers. They think very pure and straightforward, and they're not biased. They're not apprehensive. They do not think what others will think. They're extremely courageous, and this courageousness helps in making most bold and sustainable solutions. So involve your students and see how it works wonders. Making the curriculum flexible according to the needs of the disabled while keeping the objectives of education that it's the same for all the children. That's important, not strictly restricting it. I understand a lot of teachers coming from the mainstream schools have an immense pressure coming from the management to meet the deadlines and all that stuff. But it needs a lot of courage for the teachers as well as, a lot of power from within to talk to the management and, make curriculum flexible so that every student in the classroom is becoming, and the teachers for the school management, it is very vital to understand that the competition should not be within school to school. What that school is doing, so I'll also do. It should be within. My school has been doing like this for the next year. My school has to evolve like this. These are the changes. That attitude needs to be changed within the society. So that's why it's the society, regular system's responsibility. It is so teachers will have to talk it out to the school management to make these wider changes and bring in the flexibility in the curriculum. Boards have been really very flexible in terms of telling the students and managements to keep in. Teachers and the management to keep in mind to modify the curriculum or exam patterns and giving a lot of modifications, concessions and all at exam levels or in the daily classroom thing. But managements are not giving the teachers this leisure. So it's the teachers who will have to make come up and make these small little changes by showing some examples and developing healthy cultures in the management as well. Providing support for all the teachers as well as the students. That's the important thing. What I've noticed in the last 1 decade, in my experience when I'm trying to mainstream the students, most of the schools refuse the students taking into the mainstream school by saying a very fancy word that's become a trend like pari hori hai, and the trend has become that we are not fully equipped. Who is equipped? There is no one school which is fully equipped. Everyone's taking and trying to take the recommendations by the boards and government policies and stuff. If you don't know how to do it, Ask for help. There are a lot of people who are really willing to help. There are really breakthrough organizations who have come up with sustainable solutions, like Passive Society is doing commendable job in promoting inclusion. KPMRC, a lot of organizations are Brindavan Education Trust. A lot of schools are there. Lots of schools, established mainstream schools like Indus International or Canadian International Schools. Lots of schools are coming up with lots of better inclusive. When you don't know, ask for help. They're willing to help. They'll be more than happy to help you out. And work in collaboration. Collaboration only will improvise on one's own. So it's very important to ask for help. So coming back to the talks, problem statement. More often than not, schools are leading towards full inclusion in the classroom. In the last 1 decade, inclusion has come to a lot of good shape in India, especially talking from Bangalore's perspective, it's come to a really very good shape. They're evolving towards inclusive classrooms. There are pros and cons for this system. And the biggest problem statement, usually management teachers ask here is, or the parents ask here is this best for all students who are involved in it? Of course, it is best. How it is best, we can, discuss this in, further slides. But then the question shouldn't be, is it best? Is it the right thing to do or not? And the answer is yes, of course, it is the right thing to do. Then the next problem statement that people come up with is, what does the research show? That how the inclusive classrooms are evolving and all that stuff. Research keeps changing with the evolving times. You cannot always restrict your knowledge to the previous studies and all. You yourself in your own school or in your own house or your workplace can develop a surveys for DA and have your own research and see how you have been improvising on it. But however, research has been showing that mainstream classrooms which are inclusive, promoting inclusive educations, have actually benefited the mainstream students rather than the actual special needs student who are a part. Because in the regular curricula, especially in India, empathy, kindness, a lot of soft skills are not taught through the textbooks. These have to be taught through regular experiences in lifestyle. So inclusive classrooms have been promoting these soft skills and most intricate and delicate things, and the students are evolving as finer adults. So this is what the research is showing. But then again, it's very not so neat to always go by the bookish knowledge or facts and figures that were long back written down. You also have to make your own research protocols for your own organization and set an example as a leader. What does the law say? Law says that everyone has to benefit, so we have to stick to law. That's why the first slide that I was showing, it states that it's a legal right for everyone. That inclusion has to be, so we don't have a choice but accept and embrace this and find solutions for it. From what are the pros of inclusive education classroom? Disabled students do as well, if not better, in an inclusive classroom compared to a separate classroom. They also do a lot better because they have other students to engage, so social skills and communication skills, and most importantly, the personality development happens drastically than any other academic development. So they do well like the others in the classroom. Inclusion helps with socialization for the students with disabilities. Advanced students become more accepting and start to offer help for their struggling peers. What are the cons? Not all students learn the best in this environment, because there are modifications, and as of now, generations together, a schema has been set, a classroom has to be taught in this way, and this is what the curricula has been set. So any modifications done to the curricula or the methodologies and approaches, you don't see that happiness that the previous one has been setting, because it takes a lot of courage to move out of that bubble, to be able to fail and recreate, and to eventually lead to a better thing. So the con is that not all the students learn best in this environment in the first go. Some students need more individualized instruction because they learn at a slower pace. So, in spite of this inclusive classroom, there still will be some students who might need extra practice or, extra time to learn and, generalize. However, the other con for inclusive education is that a general education classroom can provide too much of stimulation for the other ones also, because the teacher will have to do a multi-sensory model and stuff. So it can be too much overstimulating for the other students who do not really need so much of stimulation. So, those are the things, the small little things everyone needs to keep in mind while, delicately and intricately designing the inclusive education classroom. Principles for the schools: zero rejection by law. All the disabled students or children have the equal right, and it's they have to be included not just in curricular but in co-curricular activities as well. It is a school which has to adjust according to the needs of the requirement of the disabled children. And it's a school responsibility to provide for the training of the regular teachers as well. It's not just about bringing in the students to be in the classroom. That's not the inclusion idea. Idea is that everyone takes up responsibility to make all learners. So if learners have to achieve their fullest, then teachers also have to be trained. Unfortunately, in the regular B.Ed, there is just one paragraph of 3 sentences on what is inclusion. We, being special educators, therapists running in these NGOs, we still try to dig deep into inclusion and understand it from different perspectives. How can we expect the mainstream school teachers to understand what inclusion is when they haven't ever heard? When I've done almost 70 workshops in mainstream schools, corporates all over India and outside. Especially in India, when I asked the teachers in the mainstream classrooms, I asked the teachers, how many of you have heard the word autism? Out of 120 teachers, hardly 1 or 2 hands shoot up. It's not their mistake. It's a mistake of the curricula, the B.Ed curricula, or the same old thing that's been being followed for decades together now. Classrooms are changing, so the B.Ed curricula also has to change. We have diverse needs of students. Earlier, disability wasn't this prevalent, but now it's too prevalent. So curricula has to change, keeping in view of that. Unfortunately, it's not happening. So who will do the changes that are required and equipped? It's the school managements who will have to come forward. Sometimes school managements might not. So the NGO runner, people who are running NGOs and organizations, they have to go and tell them that this is what the law is stating. It's not your fault or your teacher's fault. It's we who want to like to help you out, and so that you can become a better school by next year, and this is how you can benefit. So that's why awareness programs and drives are important. Teachers have to be empowered. When the teachers say that we are not fully equipped, they are partially true, but then it has to come from within, that I want to learn and equip myself, and they don't know how to do it. We have to go and train them. The next one is to provide for vocational training suitable according to their abilities at higher and senior secondary level as well, to promote awareness and realization in the community for the education of the disability children. Usually inclusive education passion and that zest and the intense work restricts by the time students leave to the middle school. Higher school, it slows down, and by the time they enter their college and all, it usually fades out. There are no too many reforms or changes that are being recommended or happening at college level for the students with disabilities. It's a major struggle. That's why they usually end up after finishing 10th and 12th. Very few people, out of 100 people who are writing NIOS 10th or 12th or state board CBSE exams or state PUC exams, after 12th, they either restricted to NGOs and making it small scale, paper bag making, home candle making and all that stuff, but not really aim to go to higher college level, because at college level the system is even more rigid than the school level. So dropout rate of students with disabilities to go to that level is not as equivalent as it was it is in for the school education level. So community based promotion is really very important, the awareness. So competencies for the teachers should have this ability to solve the problems. You don't have to be really a special educator. You can actually solve a lot of problems if you start thinking through it logically. If you have that, you will be able to come up with lots of solutions. You fail it and then you come up. This is not an exam that nobody is going to fail you if your solution is failed. It is okay. We'll reinvent, we'll relook into what has gone wrong and come up with better solutions. The teacher should know about the interest and aptitudes and abilities of the students with special needs and how they can make use of that in the various skills while being taught in the classroom. They should have the ability to set higher targets for students with disability and not compromise in the goals. Have the ability to provide successful experiences in the disability children. We should prove them that you can also succeed. Those small little opportunities have to be provided so that their motivation and curiosity is also developed to continue and sustain in the class, and that intrinsic thing has to be put forth. Teachers also have knowledge about the special instructional material and how to use them. They should be highly patient, welcoming, polite, and devoted. This devoted word again goes back to the slide where I was showing you that commitment thing. They have to be devoted to what they are working towards. Should work as a team with parents and special educators and with other collaborators as well, keeping a record of child's achievements and failures as well as what has gone wrong so that other teachers can learn from it. So what does an inclusive classroom look like? Usually there are 2 teachers in a general classroom. One is a special ed teacher and the other one is a special education assistant teacher or a special educator. Students consist of both special ed students and general ed students who are taught together. In a real classroom, a person who is visiting the classroom should not be able to identify who is a special educator, who is a general ed teacher. They both should collaborate and work together in a way that nobody should be able to discriminate. Similarly, the students also have to be taught or dealt with in the same way that nobody should be able to spot them, and they themselves should not feel that they're disabled, that because of them the curricula has been modified and compromised, or some that kind of attitudes should not be developed. It should become a perfectly difficult situation for an onlooker to identify whether it's a special classroom or an inclusive classroom or what is it. They should not be able to discriminate. So that's a perfect model of ideal situation that where we all have to go towards by redesigning things. Recommendations for lesson planning. So consider the timing, the variation of the activities, types of activities, moving from concrete to abstract level. Reinforcements of key ideas is very important so that students with various disabilities and special needs don't miss out on those. Extension of work, recall of previous work. These are all recommendations for the general ed class teachers. I'm not going to run point by point. These are all self-explanatory. You'll be receiving a PDF. You can go through it. So teaching styles, for example, you have you need to understand what are the different styles of learners in the mixed classroom. There could be students with visual intelligence or auditory intelligence or kinesthetic and tactile intelligence. Keeping in view of these different varied styles of learners, we need to design our classrooms. And then preparing the materials accordingly, based on what. One of you were also mentioning about accessibility. It is also about accessibility. That is true. Whether our teaching plan is being accessible by every student in the classroom is not is something that we need to keep looking into and empathizing and reinventing our own TLMs, teaching learning materials. So all our classroom strategies and materials have to be accessible. Not just the classroom, but even the other resources in the classroom, that is library or games room. The strategy of competitions itself has to change, because not everybody in the school can participate in competitions. So the strategy evolving of evaluating a competition itself has to change. If you're having a drawing competition, the evaluation process has to be modified, not just the classroom teaching strategies. At every step, there has to be a diversity and inclusion survey that needs to be done, so that you're identifying the problems and making it a better occurrence. Then there are supporting devices, thanks to a lot of technology that has come into place in support of inclusion. So I've recommended here for visually impaired students, physically impaired students, physically handicapped students, students with hearing impaired and intellectual disability and slow learners. What are things that they can use? Even students for gifted IQ children also, what they can use at classroom level have been listed. These are some of the examples. Teachers can manipulate it and reuse, reinvent, recreate these ideas. Self-explanatory, I'm skipping it through. So the research, as I mentioned in one of the previous slides, the research has supported that it is more than the special needs students, the other students who are also benefiting. These are the attitudes that are fostered, that can be fostered in the students who are participating in the inclusive classroom. It's a sense of belongingness, equality, responsibility, sense of team, problem-solving abilities, empathy, kindness. These are the 32 different aspects that can be worked upon, which cannot be taught through textbooks or lesson plans or through lecture-based methods. These will happen only when you have a mixed classroom. They will see, fall, fail, but pull together and then learn it together. And there's something beautiful. These are the skills that are really required for the 21st century, not the textbook skills. Our exam patterns, if you look into the fourth industrial revolution, where the curriculum that we are following right now is all for industrial workers who are expected to sit for longer hours and work in factories and all. But system has changed. We are no more factory workers. There are very few factories, and there's a huge shift in the working environment itself. So these work environments do not require students or employees to sit for longer hours. So that whole thing has to be changed. That attitude to sit for a longer time has to be changed. So inclusive classrooms can be a solution for this. Problem solving abilities, all these things will be taught, through inclusive education classroom. To put it in a nutshell, the first bubble shows you what is exclusion. Exclusion is a mainstream classroom where two students or people with different disabilities are put outside. Segregation is where exclusion means complete ignorance of students with disabilities outside, whereas segregation is you're teaching them also and teaching these also, but in a different classrooms. Integration is bringing this bubble and putting it inside, but you still know who are those students with special needs. That's integration. You usually our school classrooms in a mainstream school are integrated classrooms, not really inclusive classroom, because you can actually spot on the students with special needs, and you know that the student with special need is being ignored. I'm not commenting this for all the schools, but some of the schools, when you go for your recommendations, you can actually spot on that's what is called as integration. It's not inclusion. Inclusion by real means everyone is equal. You will not be able to spot who is who and all. Everybody is equal there. That's inclusion. So let's all work towards that. It cannot be achieved in one single day by one single person. It's a process. So that's the end of today's session on inclusion. Thank you so much.